This tutorial is a brief introduction to the Disability Resource Center at Portland State University. In this tutorial, we will answer some basic questions for instructors such as: what is the DRC? Who works with the DRC? What is the instructor's role in working with the DRC? And throughout, we'll discuss what an accommodation is and how it might relate to your teaching. First, the Disability Resource Center, usually referred to as the DRC, is a part of PSU's institutional commitment to increasing the accessibility of instruction for students with disabilities. The goal of the DRC is to work collaboratively with students and instructors to make PSU course content maximally accessible to a broad range of students. Finally, the DRC helps to develop individualized plans to support learning for students with disabilities. The process of working with the DRC is somewhat variable, but in general, it begins with students self-referring to the DRC for a determination of their eligibility for DRC services. Students must self-refer to the DRC. It is not appropriate for instructors to refer students directly to the DRC. Similarly, instructors are not allowed to require a student to seek services from the DRC, nor can instructors unilaterally decide a student's eligibility for accommodations. Ultimately, the professionals at the DRC will determine whether a given student is eligible to receive services through the DRC. If the DRC determines that a student is eligible for accommodations, they will contact the instructor with an initial accommodations plan. This brings up the question of what an accommodation actually is. Technically, an accommodation is a reasonable adaptation to standard instructional techniques and/or materials that will assist a student with a disability as they attempt to access the information in a course. From the instructor's perspective, the first notice of DRC involvement is often an email that arrives from the DRC. The email typically looks like this at the beginning. The rest of the letter will outline the accommodations that the student qualifies for, and it will give specific instructions for those particular accommodations that the student is requesting for your specific course. In some cases, a student might qualify for some accommodations that they are not requesting for your course at this time. You are not responsible for implementing accommodations that are not requested. If you would like to see a sample letter from the DRC in its entirety, go to this website. Once you've received the communication from the DRC, you will have been notified about the accommodations that have been requested. It is then your responsibility to implement the accommodations as requested. It is not your role to determine which accommodations are appropriate for any given student. You should begin to implement the requested accommodations as soon as you receive the letter from the DRC. It's always a good idea to meet with the DRC staff member who is working with your student as soon as possible to discuss implementation plans. This is especially important if you have concerns about the feasibility of implementing any requested accommodations. Under no circumstances should you decide unilaterally not to implement a requested accommodation. Decisions about what constitutes a reasonable accommodation can only be made in collaboration with the DRC. The overarching goal of the DRC is to have the accommodations process be collaborative. This means that the DRC, the student, and the instructor should ideally work together to find the best way for the student to access course material. It's important to note that the DRC does not require instructors to change the essential content of their course as an accommodation. Furthermore, determining which accommodations are reasonable should be a collaborative act. The main rule of thumb is that if you are in doubt about what you should do or what is reasonable, then your first action should be to meet with the DRC. Accommodations are designed to meet the individualized needs of each student, so each student's accommodation plan will look slightly different. Still, certain types of accommodations come up fairly frequently. Examples of these include using a sign language interpreter during classes, allowing extra time for exams, or the use of a paid note-taker during lectures. Many other types of accommodations exist in addition to these, though, so it's important to read the notice from the DRC carefully so that you understand exactly what is being requested. One example of an accommodation deserves special mention, as it's caused some confusion recently. For some instructors, providing lecture notes, such as PowerPoint slides, before class is a default action. Other instructors prefer not to post lecture notes ahead of time as a matter of course. Either of these choices is fine as a default. However, some students may qualify to have lecture notes provided before class as an accommodation for their disability. This accommodation provides students with disabilities some exposure to the information presented in class so that they're better able to track the lecture and therefore access the information you present. If students in your class have this accommodation, then you are required to provide advanced lecture notes to these students, even if you do not provide advanced lecture notes for other students in the class. Keep in mind that the DRC exists to support you in addition to their work supporting students. The staff at the DRC has specific experience and expertise in designing ways to maximize accessibility of educational materials. Increasing the accessibility of course materials improves your effectiveness as an educator, helping to increase the reach of your teaching. The DRC can also provide suggestions for certain kinds of technology that can help in producing maximally accessible materials. And, of course, the DRC staff can consult about options for working with individual students who are registered with the DRC. Accommodations designed with the assistance of the DRC contribute directly to PSU's institutional commitment to providing instruction that can reach the broadest possible range of learners. Working with the DRC can help improve instructional outcomes for both students and instructors. Thank you for watching this brief introduction. For more information, visit the Faculty Resources page at the DRC website or contact the DRC by phone or email at your convenience.